Yesterday began the final 100 days of the 2024 presidential election. Can you believe it? Well, as the sprint to November picks up pace, the rise of Vice President Kamala Harris as the Democrats' presumptive nominee has brought momentum to her campaign, at least among her base on the left. But what voters are saying are their top issues: inflation, the economy, and immigration. How long will this honeymoon phase last? Joining me now to discuss this and more, Scott Rasmussen. He's the president of RMG Research and the editor-at-large of Ballotpedia. Scott, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Tony, it's always great to be with you, and especially at this time of the election season.
Yeah, it's on us once again. Seems like it just keeps coming back. So let's talk about this. We're in this 100-day period as we march toward the election. Give us your assessment on the state of the race after the events of last week.
Well, I think it's a mistake to say that Vice President Harris has gained a lot of momentum or reshaped the race. A better way to look at it is the numbers we're seeing today are almost identical to the polling numbers we saw on June 26th. That's right before Joe Biden had that disastrous debate. What that means is the popular vote is maybe a toss-up, maybe Trump ahead by a point or two. That means that he's got the advantage in the key swing states. One way that I would describe it is with Biden as the Democratic nominee, the Democrats, well, they were coming to bat in the bottom of the ninth, down by 6 or 7 runs. With Harris as the nominee, they're coming to bat still down, but only by a run or two. So it's possible to see a path forward, but it's not really a new race at this point.
Is this going to be a base turnout election for Democrats? I mean, when you look at the issues that Kamala Harris is focusing on, abortion being, one of her top issues, and of course now they're talking about the court, which is closely linked to the issue of abortion. Is this designed to mobilize and enthuse their base?
Absolutely, it's designed to mobilize their base. One of the challenges that Democrats have had this cycle is younger voters, and a lot of more progressive voters just aren't that excited about the Democratic team. So by focusing on those issues, on those hot button base issues, they're looking to get out that vote. And look, 2 years ago, they did a very good job of getting out the vote in certain districts. Now, the challenge is voters tell us the top issue is inflation. The second most important issue are other economic concerns. And number 3 on the list is immigration. On all of those issues, President Trump is trusted far more than Vice President Harris is today, or than President Biden has been. I think we need to be a little careful about those numbers. Let's see what happens over the next couple of weeks as voters get to know Vice President Harris a little more. But right now, those issues leaning very much against Vice President Harris. And I had to chuckle. There was a newspaper headline in the New York Times saying that some of her past policy positions may not help her in this year's campaign. Thought that was one of the great understatements.
Yes, I was going to say that is an understatement. But you say don't pay too much attention to the numbers. I agree, but there is one number that I focus on, and it's not the top line numbers, but it's more the intensity number. And when you and I have talked about this before, but for those on the left, and I'm speaking in very general terms, but for those that usually vote on the left for Democrats, they see government differently. They see government as really it is a big deal. It's almost, for some, becomes religious, because that is the way they pursue their values. That's the way they pursue, even when you look at taxes, how they care for the poor and everything else. Where those on the right, especially evangelical voters, see government as something we have to do, but there are things that are a higher priority. Is that intensity level, where is that at present? Is it with the Republicans, Democrats? Is it equal?
Before Vice President Harris became the presumptive nominee, the advantage was clearly on the Republican side. Right now, it appears to have reached a point where both sides have that same degree of passion. But again, one of the things that's very difficult with President Trump in the race is figuring out who is actually going to show up and vote. As you and I have talked lots of times, that's what really matters. Uh, and there are people who vote almost all the time who were telling us a month ago they didn't want to vote in a Trump-Biden match. They were unhappy with both sides. So we're going to look and see how those people shift as they get to know Vice President Harris a little bit. Look, I think the reality is Donald Trump brings out people who don't regularly vote, and the more they get to know about Vice President Harris, the more enthusiastic they will be about voting. And on the other side of the aisle, the abortion issue, the Supreme Court, other topics, that will fire up the base on the Democratic Party. I do think the Republicans have the edge at this point, but it is far from over with 100 days to go.
So, Scott, speaking of the court and the issue of the sanctity of human life, when you go back to 2016, 2020, you had then candidate Trump in 2016 put forth a list of candidates, pro-life judges for the court, embracing a party platform that was clearly pro-life. This time backing away from the life issue, not talking so much about the courts. If Biden makes it, or if Harris makes this a primary issue and Trump doesn't respond to it, how is that going to work out?
Well, he's going to have to respond, and what he has said publicly is he's going to leave it to the states. I think the challenge for the movement is that for 50 years, the objective was very clear, and that was to overturn Roe v. Wade. And now that that's happened, the movement is still struggling a little bit to find its footing. We live in a nation where overwhelmingly voters say it'd be better if we have fewer abortions. At the same time, they're really uncomfortable with restrictions on the right of a woman to choose, and the movement needs to find a better way to address that issue.
All right. Well, Scott, I'm sure we're going to be talking quite a bit over the next 99 days as we approach that November election.
Look forward to it, Tony.